I used to think health was about pushing myself, running farther, eating stricter, sleeping less if needed, always striving towards something better, thinner, faster, stronger, sharper. But then 60 came. And with it, a quiet question I hadn't heard before. Is all this effort still giving me peace? I didn't have an answer at first. Because truthfully, I hadn't been listening to myself for a long time. In my younger years, I was so busy trying to stay healthy that I never stopped to ask what that actually meant for me. I followed what everyone else followed. I copied routines. I made goals that sounded good in conversations, even if they never really felt like mine. And then something shifted. Not in one dramatic moment, but gradually. My body began to speak in new ways. A twinge here. A stiffness there. A heaviness after a long day, not in my limbs, but in my spirit. And when I pushed harder, it didn't respond like it used to. It protested. And I, stubborn as I am, resisted for a while. But the truth was simple. What used to be strength was now strain. What used to feel like progress, now just felt like pressure. So I sat myself down one morning, with a warm cup of tea, and I asked gently, what do I want now? The answer surprised me. Not abs. Not accolades. Not more steps or stricter rules. Just peace. I wanted peace when I opened my eyes. Peace in my meals. Peace when I caught my reflection in the mirror, not judgment. Not critique. Just acceptance. I no longer needed to improve myself every day. I needed to live inside myself more kindly. So I began to redefine what health meant for me. Not as perfection, but as permission. To rest. To move gently. To enjoy food without labeling it good or bad. To walk, not to burn calories, but to breathe more deeply. To stretch in the morning, not to reach a pose, but to feel my body say, thank you for noticing me. I stopped chasing young and started choosing well. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt guilty for not doing more. Days when old voices returned, telling me I should be more disciplined, more active, more something. But I've learned something soft and steady. Peace is a kind of strength too. And after 60, it's the one I value most. These days, when I wake up, I no longer ask, how much can I get done today? Instead, I ask, how do I want to feel at the end of it? If the answer is tired, but centered, that's a good day. If the answer is slow, but whole, that's a victory. And if some days I feel a little fragile, that's allowed too. I don't fight that anymore. I've made peace my priority. Not a perfect diet. Not a perfect schedule. Not a perfectly youthful body. But a mind that can breathe. A heart that doesn't race all the time. A body that feels safe with me, even if it's slower, even if it needs more care. Peace isn't passive. It takes daily choosing. Daily unlearning. And daily forgiving, especially of myself. So if you're listening to this and feeling like you're behind, in health, in energy, in where you thought you'd be by now, let me offer this. Maybe it's not about catching up anymore. Maybe it's about catching your breath. Because you're allowed to change your pace. You're allowed to want softness instead of sharpness. And you're allowed, at any age, to say, what matters most to me now is peace. There was a time when my mornings felt like a race. Even after I retired, with no boss, no meetings, no clock-in deadlines, I still woke up with that old urgency in my bones. That sense that the day was already running ahead of me, and I had to chase after it. So I'd rush through the morning without thinking. Coffee. Phone. News. maybe breakfast, maybe not. My thoughts would scatter before I even stood up straight. It wasn't that I was busy. It was that I didn't know how to slow down yet. And then one morning, I forgot to check my phone. I had left it in the other room the night before. I sat by the window instead, hands wrapped around a warm mug, and for the first time in a while, I simply looked out at the soft light, the trees moving gently, a bird hopping along the railing. No notifications, no urgency, just the sound of my own breath and the quiet around me. That morning became a turning point. Not a big one. Not a dramatic vow to transform my life. Just a question: what if I began each day like this? So I began experimenting. And now, for over 2 years, I've kept a quiet little morning rhythm that's become one of the most grounding parts of my life. It's simple, and maybe that's why it works. I don't wake to an alarm. I let the light stir me. I sit up slowly, give my legs a moment to find themselves. I drink a full glass of water before anything else. And then I do the one thing that changed everything. I give myself the first 30 minutes of the day. No screens. No rush. Just me, being with me. I open the curtains. I make my tea. I sit in the same chair. I let the morning speak before I start talking back. Some days I read a few pages of something gentle. Other days I just sit. Sometimes I jot down a sentence or two in a notebook, not a full journal, just a thought I don't want to lose. And on most days, I light a small candle. Not for any reason but this, to mark that I've arrived. I'm here. The day has begun. And I don't need to sprint into it. This tiny ritual, done in silence, has become a doorway into calmness I didn't know I was missing. It helps me remember that I am not just a body that gets things done. I am a spirit, a mind, a being that deserves a kind welcome into each day. I used to believe mornings needed to be productive. Now I believe they need to be sacred. Of course, some mornings go differently. A call comes early. A neighbor needs help. My knees ache more than usual. But even then, I try to hold the spirit of the space, not just the steps. Because the power of a morning routine isn't in how perfect it is. It's in the way it tells your nervous system, you are safe. You don't have to be afraid of the day. That shift, from tension to trust, has changed the way my body feels. My digestion is better. My thoughts are clearer. I speak more gently throughout the day because my first conversation was with silence. And maybe most importantly, I've stopped waking with dread. That old ache in the chest that says, there's too much, it visits less now. Because I meet it early, before the noise begins, and I say to it, come in. Sit down. Let's not rush anything today. That's how I begin. No strict schedule. No pressure to win the morning. Just a quiet choosing, over and over again, to greet the day with softness, not speed. And somehow, the rest of the day follows. I used to think exercise had to hurt to work. I believed in sweat, in discipline, in pushing limits. That was the voice I grew up with, the one that said, no pain, no gain. So when I reached my 60s and couldn't keep up with the routines I once did, I thought I was failing. I tried to go on long walks like I used to, but my knees whispered back, not today. I followed a workout video someone recommended, but my breath caught up before I could. For a while, I gave up. Not because I didn't want to move, but because I didn't want to fight myself anymore. And then something shifted, quietly, slowly. It happened one morning. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, stretching my arms out like I always do. But instead of rushing through it, I paused. I let the stretch linger. I inhaled deeply, and something clicked. It didn't hurt. It felt good. Simple. Honest. Mine. That was the first moment I stopped thinking of movement as exercise, and started thinking of it as listening. What if I just let my body move the way it wanted to today? That question changed everything. I began with 5 minutes in the morning. Some stretches. A few shoulder rolls. Gentle neck circles. No rules. No reps, just presence. Some days, I followed a slow Tai Chi video on mute. Other days, I put on soft music and let myself sway around the kitchen. I started walking again, but slower, not as cardio, but as communion. A walk not to get anywhere, but to come back to myself. And I noticed something I hadn't felt in a long time. My body was grateful. Not for being pushed, but for being noticed. Not for being shaped, but for being cared for. That's what I'd missed all those years when I was trying to stay fit. I forgot my body wasn't a machine. It was a home. And it had been waiting patiently for me to treat it like one. Now, movement is part of my day the way breathing is. Not dramatic. Not scheduled. Just steady. I walk every afternoon when the light is kind. I stretch before bed, even if it's only 10 minutes. Sometimes I lie on the floor and just let my back sink into the earth, feeling my weight as permission to rest. I don't track steps anymore. I track how I feel. And most days, I feel alive. Not in a youthful way, but in a truthful way. This body of mine, with its lines and aches and softer edges, it still moves. And more importantly, it wants to move. Just not in the ways I once demanded. It wants flow, not force. Gentleness, not punishment. Consistency, not intensity. That's the lesson I keep learning. It's not about how hard I move, it's about how lovingly I do it. And the more I listen, the more my body responds. My balance is better. I sleep more deeply. Even my digestion feels calmer. But more than all that, I trust my body again. Not to look a certain way. Not to perform. Just to be with me, in rhythm, not in resistance. And in a world where we're told to fight aging, I've decided to dance with it instead. For most of my life, food was something I controlled. I measured it, calculated it, earned it, sometimes even punished myself with it. Eating was rarely just eating, it was numbers, guilt, rules, bargaining. I knew how many calories were in a banana. I knew how many spoonfuls of rice I was allowed on a bad day. I kept reading articles and watching people talk about what to eat, what not to eat, how to hack hunger. And I was always a little hungry, not just in my stomach, but in my spirit. I didn't realize how long I'd been treating food like the enemy. Until I sat down one evening, alone, and asked myself, when was the last time I enjoyed a meal without judging it? I couldn't remember. That's when I knew something had to shift. It didn't happen all at once. I didn't throw out every diet book or vow to love myself overnight. But I began small. I began by watching my plate, and watching my thoughts. And the first gentle truth I came to was this. After 60, my body doesn't need more food, it needs more care. My digestion changed. My energy came in smaller waves. Heavy meals made me feel heavy in more than one way. So I started eating less, not because I wanted to be smaller, but because I wanted to feel lighter inside. I simplified. I gave up chasing superfoods and started listening to how I felt after I ate. I chose warm foods in the morning. Soup for lunch. Fruits in the afternoon. Simple dinners, mostly at home. I stopped multitasking while I ate. I began putting my fork down between bites. I lit a candle at the table, even if I was eating alone. Not because I was trying to be fancy, but because I wanted meals to feel like care, not survival. I used to eat to quiet my thoughts. Now I eat to nourish the part of me that still wants to be gentle. I gave up obsessing over protein counts, sugar grams, and the endless back and forth of health trends. Instead, I asked myself after every meal, do I feel comforted or heavy? Do I feel fueled or dulled? And slowly, I built a plate and a mindset that served my whole self. There are things I still enjoy. Fresh bread. A square of dark chocolate after lunch. Warm tea with honey at night. But I no longer eat out of boredom or to escape something. I eat with presence. My weight isn't perfect, and I don't want it to be. My lab results are steady. My digestion is better than it was 10 years ago. But more than that, I'm not afraid of food anymore. And I don't let food be afraid of me. I thank my meals now. It sounds silly, but sometimes before I eat, I whisper, "Thank you for coming to my table." Because I know that in a world of noise, choosing peace with food is a quiet kind of power. And maybe that's the biggest change. Not what's on my plate, but how I hold it. Not how many calories, but how many kind thoughts I have while eating it. Not how clean it is, but how human it feels. There was a time when I was always doing two things at once. Eating lunch while replying to emails. Listening to someone talk while planning my response. Watching TV while scrolling through my phone. Even brushing my teeth while organizing tomorrow in my head. I called it being productive. The world called it efficient. But deep down, I felt like I was always out of breath, not from running, but from never really arriving in the moment I was in. I didn't realize how much of my life I was missing, until one morning, I poured tea and forgot I'd already made it. It was still hot. Still there. But I hadn't even tasted the first cup. That moment stayed with me. I had been so used to jumping from one thing to the next that I couldn't remember the last time I did just one thing, slowly, completely, with attention. So I started noticing. How often I opened a drawer and forgot what I was looking for. How I'd start reading a book and pick up my phone 3 pages in. How even something as gentle as folding laundry became a task to rush through. And I asked myself, is this how I want to live the rest of my days, fast, scattered, half there? The answer, quietly, was no. So I tried something radical in its simplicity. I began doing one thing at a time. Not always. Not perfectly. But intentionally, for part of each day, I chose to be fully in whatever I was doing. When I washed dishes, I just washed dishes. I felt the warmth of the water. I noticed how the glass caught the light. When I walked, I walked. No podcast. No checking my steps. Just the sound of my feet meeting the earth. At first, it was uncomfortable, like my mind didn't know what to do with the empty space. But then something beautiful happened. I started breathing again. Not shallow, distracted breaths, but long, quiet ones. The kind that reaches into your chest and tells your body, it's okay. You're safe. I had been so busy doing that I'd forgotten how to simply be. Now, I call it my single task moments. Tiny pockets in the day where I gently return to one thing. Not because I have to, but because it feels good to be whole again, not split between 5 things, not hovering above myself. It doesn't mean I get less done. Ironically, I get more done now, but with less effort. Because I'm not draining myself in all directions. I'm present. Clearer. Calmer. and my body thanks me. My digestion is better. My sleep deeper. Even my conversations feel warmer, because I'm actually in them. It's funny how doing less made room for more peace. More noticing. More meaning. More moments I used to rush past. Now, when I eat, I put my fork down between bites. When I read, I don't highlight every page, I just read, slowly. When I sit in the garden, I don't feel the need to document it, I simply sit. It's a quiet revolution, this shift. To stop multitasking isn't just about attention. It's about respect, for the moment, for the body, for the breath that holds us together. Most people talk about morning routines. They say how you start your day sets the tone. And I believe that. But no one told me how important the middle of the day is. That stretch of time when energy dips, thoughts blur, and the world gets noisier. For most of my life, I used that time to power through. Push harder. Drink more coffee. Check more tasks off a list that never really ended. But something shifted after I turned 60. I began to feel it, that quiet overwhelm just after lunch. Not dramatic. Not urgent. Just a weight behind my eyes and a fog in my chest. And one day, instead of pushing through it, I sat down. Not on a sofa. Not with a screen. Just on a cushion by the window, back straight, hands resting on my lap. I didn't plan it. I didn't call it meditation. I just sat. And breathed. The house was still. The sun came through the curtains in long gold ribbons. And for maybe 5 minutes, I didn't think about what came next. I simply was. That was the first afternoon silence I gave myself, and something in me exhaled like it hadn't in years. I began returning to that space. Not with pressure. Not with rules. Just with the intention to stop doing, and start listening. Listening to my breath. To the small creaks of the house. To the birds. To my own heartbeat. To the parts of myself that only speak when everything else gets quiet. At first, it felt strange. Like I was wasting time. But slowly, that quiet time became a thread holding my day together. Now, every afternoon, usually sometime between 2 and 4, I pause. Sometimes I sit in silence for 10 minutes. Sometimes 20. Some days I do nothing but rest my hands on my chest and let my shoulders drop. And on those days when I miss it, I feel it. Not in guilt, but in tightness. A tension in my jaw. A faster breath. A heaviness in my step. It's like my body says, "Hey, you forgot to check in with me." This silence isn't fancy. I don't light candles or chant mantras. I just sit. Phone turned face down. No agenda. No outcome. And something beautiful always happens in that stillness. Not grand insight. Not revelation. Just a gentle rebalancing. A reminder that I am not just what I do. I am also what I rest into. This practice, if it can be called that, taught me that silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means I'm finally giving room for what matters most to speak. In that space, I've felt old emotions soften. I've remembered names I thought I forgot. I've forgiven myself for things I didn't know I was still holding. Most importantly, I've felt at home in myself. Not for being busy. Not for being useful. Just for being here. So now, if someone asks me what keeps my mind calm, I say this. A quiet seat by the window every afternoon. No apps. No goals. Just breath. Just me. That's where I return to myself. There was a time when I said yes to every invitation. Lunches I didn't want. Phone calls I didn't have energy for. Family gatherings that drained me more than they filled me. I told myself it was the right thing to do. To show up. To be polite. To stay connected. But somewhere around 60, I started noticing something. Not everyone I spent time with made me feel more alive. Some left me quieter. Others left me heavier. And for the longest time, I thought that was just how life worked. That you had to put up with certain people. That being tired after socializing was normal. That your energy didn't really matter. Until I sat down one evening, after a long lunch with an old friend, and I asked myself, why do I feel lonelier after being with them? That question didn't accuse anyone. It just told the truth. And the truth was this: not everyone feeds your soul, some just fill your time. So I began to pay attention. Not to who was the most fun. Not to who I'd known the longest. But to who made my body feel safe. Who let me be slow. Who didn't rush my words or roll their eyes at my softness. I noticed that after spending time with certain people, I slept better. I breathed deeper. I didn't replay the conversation in my head wondering if I said too much. Those were the ones I wanted to keep close. I didn't make a grand announcement. I didn't cut people out in anger. I just gently stopped showing up where my spirit didn't feel welcome. I gave myself permission to protect my peace, not from drama, but from exhaustion. Because there's a kind of tiredness that comes not from doing too much, but from being too much for the wrong company. Now, I spend time with people who understand pauses in conversation. Who aren't afraid of silence. Who don't need to be entertained. I sit with those who ask real questions. Who wait for real answers. Who don't try to fix me when I say I'm sad, but simply say, I've felt that too. We don't always talk about deep things. Sometimes we just drink tea. But even in the quiet, I feel met, not judged, not corrected. Just seen. I've learned that connection isn't about quantity. It's not about how many people know your birthday, or how many likes your post gets. It's about how safe your nervous system feels around someone. And after 60, my body is more honest than ever. It tells me when someone's energy feels rushed. When someone's words sound nice, but their presence feels sharp. When someone loves you, but only the version of you they understand. So now, I honor that. Not by shutting people out, but by choosing more carefully who I let in. I still love many people from afar. But the ones I sit with, the ones I open my slow afternoons to, are few. And that has made all the difference. They say you become like the people you spend the most time with. So now, I choose to be around gentleness, slowness, quiet strength. Because that's what I want to grow into. And I hope, in my presence, others feel the same. That they can breathe. That they can slow down. That they are allowed to be real. Pain used to scare me. Not just the physical kind, though that too, but the ache that settled in the chest, in the back of the eyes, in the long pauses between one thought and the next. It arrived as stiffness in the knees, and sometimes as silence in the heart. It wore many faces, a lost friend, an old memory, a disappointing afternoon. I didn't always know where it came from. I just knew I didn't want it to stay. So I did what many of us do. I kept busy. I explained it away. I told myself it was nothing, just age, just the weather, just hormones, just me being dramatic. I treated pain like an uninvited guest, something to close the door on, or walk around quietly and pretend not to notice. But pain, like truth, doesn't vanish just because we ignore it. It waits. And when it's tired of waiting, it speaks louder. For me, it started showing up in my sleep. Waking in the middle of the night, heart racing. A sadness I couldn't name. A tightness in my body that no stretch could ease. And one day, sitting alone after a walk, I whispered out loud without thinking, "I'm tired of pretending I'm okay all the time." That's when something softened. Not the pain, not right away, but the fear of it. I realized I didn't have to fix it. I just had to stop fighting it. So I did something strange, something new. I started to sit with it. Literally. In my favorite chair, cup of tea in hand, I'd say quietly in my mind, "Okay. You can be here now. Let's breathe together." And you know what? The pain never yelled back. It didn't explode. It didn't grow claws. It simply became something I could hold. Not forever. Not without tears. But long enough to see it not as my enemy, but as my body's way of asking, "Will you listen to me now?" Some days the pain still comes, in my lower back, in my quiet heart. But now, I don't brace myself against it. I greet it like an old companion who walks slowly beside me. I breathe deeper. I use heat instead of harshness. I walk slower on days when my knees complain, not out of defeat, but out of respect. I've learned that softness is not weakness. It's a form of wisdom. The kind that whispers, "You can keep going, even if it hurts. Just go gently." Not everything needs to be cured. Some things just need to be cared for. So I care. I care for the aching parts. I speak to them kindly, the way I would a frightened child. "I see you. I'm here. We'll get through today together." There's no magic in that. But there is healing. Because when I stopped fighting pain, it stopped fighting me. And we began walking together, quietly, patiently, honestly. Now, when someone asks how I deal with getting older, I say this: I don't fight the changes. I walk with them. I ask them what they're teaching me. It doesn't make pain disappear. But it makes it bearable. It makes it part of the journey, not a detour. And most of all, it gives me peace. The kind that doesn't depend on perfect health, but on knowing that whatever arrives in my body, I will meet it with presence, not panic. There was a time when I thought joy had to be big. A celebration. A trip. A life-changing event. Something worth a photo. Something you tell others about. But as the years went on, the definition changed. Not all at once. It shifted the way sunlight does at dusk, slowly, beautifully, until one day I looked around and realized, joy, for me now, is small. And more importantly, it's quiet. It's the sound of a kettle boiling. The soft knock of wind against the window. The way my slippers feel when I first slide into them on a chilly morning. It's the first sip of tea when I've brewed it just right. Or that one book I've read 3 times and still reach for on quiet afternoons. It's when the sun hits the floorboards at exactly the right angle, and I pause to watch the dust dance in the light. It's hearing birds outside, not rare ones, just familiar, and remembering that not everything good has to be new. These joys aren't impressive. They won't make anyone say wow. But they keep me alive, not just breathing, but feeling. They remind me that life doesn't owe me fireworks. Sometimes, all it gives me is a warm moment between 2 ordinary hours, and that's enough. I've stopped waiting for perfect days. Instead, I gather pieces of joy as I go, like stones in my pocket. Soft. Unpolished. But mine. The scent of clean laundry. A letter in the mail that isn't a bill. A stranger who holds the door and nods with kindness in their eyes. These are the things that wake something gentle in me, a kind of quiet gladness I never knew how much I needed until now. Some days, when the world feels loud and fast, I light a candle and sit beside it without doing anything else. No goal. No conversation. Just me and the flame. That moment, too, is joy. Not because it changes my life, but because it reminds me I have one, and I'm allowed to rest in it. There's a pear tree outside my window. Every spring, I watch it bloom, and every time, I feel like it's just for me. No one else pauses long enough to notice, but I do. That's joy, too. It took me a long time to realize that joy doesn't come from chasing. It comes from noticing. And when I began noticing, I realized it had always been there, waiting for me to slow down. Now, I start my day by asking, what tiny thing will I savor today? Not accomplish. Not conquer. Just savor. Maybe it's a quiet breakfast by myself. Maybe it's writing one sentence that feels honest. Maybe it's folding a towel slowly and feeling the fabric between my fingers. It sounds small. And it is. But it's also everything. Because in the end, joy isn't something I wait for anymore. It's something I choose, again and again, in the smallest, softest ways. And those little choices. To smile at the sky. To hum a tune from 30 years ago. To wear the warm socks. To sit with my memories, not to fix them, just to say, thank you. I still remember you. Those are the joys that keep my spirit awake. Not wide-eyed. Not restless. Just gently awake. Just here. For most of my life, my body was a project. Something to be sculpted, corrected, improved. A list of things to fix, the extra softness here, the line forming there, the ache that shouldn't be there at all. I stood in mirrors with critical eyes. Measured worth in numbers, weight, inches, steps, goals. I learned early on how to be disappointed with my reflection. And I carried that quiet dissatisfaction like a second skin, invisible, but always there. Even when others complimented me, I'd deflect. Even when I felt healthy, I found something to worry about. There was always something that could be better. Then 60 arrived. Not like a storm, but like a soft, steady wave. Not with panic, but with questions. What if this is the body I grow old in? Can I make peace with it? And slowly, I began to listen to this body differently. I noticed how much it still carries for me, without asking for thanks. How my heart beats, how my lungs rise and fall. How my hands still fold laundry and my feet still carry me down the garden path. I began to thank it. Thank you, legs, for being steady today. Thank you, back, for trying even when you ache. Thank you, skin, for holding me together, even when I've been unkind. I no longer ask my body to look young. I ask it to feel safe. To feel held. To feel like home, not a battlefield. Some mornings I still wake stiff. Some days, the mirror is not kind. But I don't fight it like I used to. I breathe through it. I meet my body with soft eyes. Because this body, this aging, imperfect, miraculous body, is not failing me. It is carrying me. Through grief. Through joy. Through memory. Through one more walk, one more hug, one more story whispered at night. I've stopped comparing my body to who I used to be. That version of me had her time. This one does too. And she deserves to be loved just as fully, not despite the changes, but because of them. Now, when I look in the mirror, I try to smile first. Not because I love every wrinkle, but because I love the person who's lived enough to have them. I rub lotion into my hands slowly. not as routine, but as reverence. I stretch not to become leaner, but to say, I care how you feel. I walk not to burn calories, but to honor the miracle of movement. I no longer wait to feel beautiful. I choose to feel kind. And that has changed everything. This body, like all things I cherish now, is not perfect. But it is honest. It is mine. And I have finally stopped asking it to apologize for being human. So if you're listening, and you feel frustrated with your body, with its pace, its shape, its limitations, let me offer this. Start small. Thank it for showing up. Even on the hard days. Even when it's tired. Even when it doesn't feel like yours anymore. Because this body is not a before and after story. It's your only body. The one that carried your laughter, your tears, your strength when no one else saw it. Love it not because it's perfect. Love it because it stayed.